All right. Well, namaskar to all of you once again. Good afternoon. It's, we keep this slot of 3 p.m. in order to facilitate students and faculty of colleges of engineering, architecture, urban planning, regional and environment planning, and the NDA students, of course. Today we have MIT participating with us as a partner institution, and you shall soon hear Professor Gaurav Kashyap speak on what he thinks or what he believes his students, and as working professionals of tomorrow, his students have to gain from such sessions as this distinguished lecture series of the Prem Jain Memorial Trust. Well, this session is, I think, about 30 such students sessions we have had over 2.5 years or so now. Every month we have one session, and every time we have had one extremely committed, very distinguished person, distinguished not as a person as much as in the quantity and quality of work that a person has done. And we have striven to see that we bring people to you who can inspire directions for young minds, especially if you're looking for careers beyond the ordinary. This series of lectures is not for someone who is looking for, let's say, a job in the IT sector, right? This is essentially for someone who is trying to breach and these membranes of possibility into the future, especially in the larger context of India's economy and India's ecology. And therefore, words like sustainability, protection of the environment, or solutions for the ecology are all part of the discourse at the distinguished lecture series of PJMT. PJMT is a trust. Now it's from 2019, it's 5 years old. We have had multiple events, of which you will see in a short film, if Yatin Malik can put this up after I speak. As far as this session today goes, I spoke to Gopalji about this, and he gave us the title that you all know on irrigation and how we approach it. Why is this important for you if you're a student, if you're an engineer, if you're an architect, an urban planner, whoever you are? Why is this important for you? Well, if you look at India and its annual water in terms of rainfall, and you know what is happening right now across the country, huge quantums of floods, and it runs many, many districts. Over 90 to 100 districts in India today are just now facing a drought. And yet you read these reports about massive floods across the West, for instance, in Gujarat and in Bombay and down south in Kerala too. So what is, if you put a wall again, on the borders of India and trapped all the water that falls, at an imaginary level, you will find that India gets the largest quantum of water, by far the largest quantum of water that any landmass of any nation receives across the world. I was telling Jain a little earlier that Europe receives an average of about 550 to 600 mm rainfall. Jaipur in India, which is supposed to be drought prone, receives about 550 mm rainfall. And you'll never see Europe coming up with challenges of drought and of water being a challenge. Well, today things are changing, of course, in the last, say, 10 years. But by and large, you have the impression that Europe is abundant on water. Why is that? Why is that with India having as much water, the focus is not on agricultural water, but on urban wastewater, on industrial water, and what you can do about industrial wastewater? Look at this one small statistic. Of the total quantum of annual renewable water that India receives, only 7% is water that you and I use in our homes, offices, IT parks, hotels, hospitals, and so on. 7%, right? And by the new water policy that the government of India announced, I think about 6 or 7 months ago, and that urban wastewater, as it's called, is about 36 billion liters per day. That figure might not make sense to you, but if you multiply that, therefore, by about 8 times, roughly 7.5 to 8 times, that is the total quantum of water, because this is just 7%. Now, industrial wastewater is about 12 to 13% by every estimate from the government and from industry, right? Well, there are challenges. I'm not denying that both of these segments of wastewater need to be addressed. But the last one is agriculture, which is 80%, 80%. And very, very little attention is paid to what you need to do to source agricultural water and what you do to agricultural wastewater. So what is agricultural wastewater about? I'm sure Gopalji will touch upon that somewhere in this discourse, but essentially we are talking about fertilizers and pesticides that poison our soils, poison, of course, our water. And then there is another level of poisoning that happens when you use deep borewell waters like you do across Delhi and into UP and West Bengal. There is the entire Gangetic Plain. And that leads to use of such deep borewell water leads to arsenic, fluoride, nitrate, heavy content of iron, and so on. There are many such, chemical contaminants that are a hazard for all of us as human beings and for livestock. That is, to me, the larger context of what we are presenting today at this series. And Gopalji insisted on calling it Revisiting Science of Irrigation, a practitioner's journey. A practitioner, I think, comes out of a sense of modesty. He's not just another practitioner, I can tell you that, I can reassure you that. And we let him speak on this subject after we have Gaurav Kashyap. Can I invite you to turn on your video, say hello to all the audience here, and then to tell us what you think of what I said and what you anticipate or expect from this lecture from Mr. S Gopal. Gaurav. Are you there, Gaurav? Kashyap? We're missing him, I think, Yatin. This happens. One of the reasons why, okay. Yatin, can you play the film now? While you maybe
no, we have a sound issue in movie, sir. We can start.
All right, wonderful. Then this gives us more time. It's 3:12, Gopalji. I leave the floor to you. You could take 30, 35, 40 minutes, whatever you think is necessary for you to leave a lasting imprint on these wonderful students and of various disciplines who are here today. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. I must thank Prem Jain Foundation Trust to give me this honor, I must say. And more so, I've been very fortunate that in the last few months, I could meet, understand Dr. Hariharan, and so thanks to both of you. What I want to start with is one, to put the theory into presentation, our understanding into presentation, but drive it through two stories. The first one is what I'll start with, because many of you are students, and it was in 1980s that the company I was working for, which was interested in rural development, was wanting to have solar, work on solar, like 1980s. So my MD and me were invited by the Prime Minister's office, Mrs. Gandhi, to take up a project in Amethi district, in Sultanpur in Amethi. So the two of us flew down there, and when I went there, well, all the government largesse, etc. So I decided that I will just spend more time with the villagers. To cut a long story short, when I went into the villages and was seeing what's happening, I found a lot of windmills. I asked the villagers, why is the windmills not being used? I mean, what is the problem? Villagers are also reluctant to give an answer to an outsider, etc., etc. But what they told me after a long persuasion with them and cajoling is very simply this. They said, "Saab, ye achhi cheez hai, isko aap current lagwa dijiye." I mean, look, the disconnect is that this windmill is going to work on its wind, but that's not what is happening. So if it can run like a fan, it will do its job. So that was my first learning about how the disconnect between what we understand and what really happens or what they think, because they are ultimately the important. But when I walked back into the town and the meeting was going on in the BDO's office, somebody was listening to a commentary. So when he was listening to a commentary in those days, commentary, English cricket commentary was in English. He said, "Why don't you speak in?" I asked him what's the score. He didn't answer. Twice, thrice, he didn't answer. I said, "Why are you wasting the battery?" Then the guy showed his transistor. On the top of it, he had solar cells, photovoltaic placed, which he stole from the BDO's office. Then I told him, "Look, very nice, sir, solar works. I'm very much interested." Then he told me, "Sir, all the good songs come either early in the morning or Binaka Gitmara comes late in the night. This doesn't work at that time. Rather than putting your energy on solar, please put your energy on lunar." So I am trying to tell you is the huge disconnect with what was very early itself discovered by me. And that's why I want to tell students to think that it is not understanding, it is a disconnect, right? That is something, it's not a gap, it's a totally different view. And I proceed. Okay, next. Can we start with that film or shall we start with can you show the film? Because I want to give the gravity of the situation too.
Yeah, Yatin, can you show that film and come back? Yeah.
So this is about one of the farmers we work with and who was part of our co-development of this technology. It is about a farm where we went. I mean, I've seen many of them, but this was where it was very poignantly hitting us, is that the farmer who had export-oriented mango trees, they were all drying and dying, despite having drip was there, and he was getting tanker waters, etc. And he spent lots of money. So we told him, let's go and see his farm. He refused to come. He said that, look, if I come to my farm, I'll think of committing suicide. I've lost money. That's one part of the story, but I don't want to lose my life. So look, and the farmer who is weeping in that film, the weeping is not the important point. The important thing he tells you is, why don't we reduce the amount of water that we apply, at least by 50%. The next is that he talks about how the soil is central to plant resilience, especially for a tropical country like us. And above all, he talks about the root link between one tree and the other, which is what now we are also finding in global literature. So I got my ecological perspective just presented by him. Can you have the film, please?
Yeah, I'll run it, but there won't be any sound, sir. Yeah.
Oh no, then you skip it then.
Just one more. You got the sound earlier when you went to play, Yatin.
Got that sound earlier, but now it's not coming up.
Okay.
There's no option coming.
Just play it. Let's see.
Okay.
Just play it a bit, maybe.
Due apologies to all of you who are present here as participants. Maybe you can explain, since it's in Telugu, you can explain what he has said, Gopalji, while the film runs.
Basically, I have one of the things is that the way he was weeping and telling what is the tragedy. And this is not the farmer who owns the land. He is one of my co-creators in what we have done. So he is saying, look, how far we are, far away we are from what nature demands of us, what science demands of us. So I'm just telling you, it was a very poignant presentation of how valuable assets were done. Remember, the Prime Minister had set up a committee, not this one, the earlier one, set up a committee to study farmer suicides in Vidarbha. The biggest cause was mortality of fruit trees, right? So therefore, this is the reason I wanted to bring that that we need to revisit irrigation, and now we'll get to the slide. Okay, let's move on.
Yes, Yatin, back to the slides. While he does that, let me acknowledge the presence of Mamta Rawat here, Abraham Yehuda from Bombay, who's been working with water and technology options with agencies in Israel. We have with us, who else do we have? We have Professor Sarla Shanti. We have many others like this who are discerning in their own ways. We have Jain from Jaipur. I will invite him to speak also. He's a very distinguished industry leader from the CII and from a few other organizations, including, of course, the Indian Green Building Council. Yatin, I'm waiting for you to put on the presentation. Thank you so much, all of you being present here. We will listen to Mr. Gopal, and after that, invite insights and thoughts from you all. Yes, over to you.
Like all academics, we have to start by presenting what is the situation. 17% of the world's population, 4% of water, farming uses 84%. Hariharan Sahab has already talked about it. And 62% of our irrigation comes from groundwater. Our irrigation water utilization efficiency is about 36 to 38%, half of the global average, right? Or at least for these developed countries. Groundwater withdrawal has increased. There's a change in the food basket, which means perennials. Why I'm talking of this is because water in summer is the crucial topic. We talk of water in cubic meters, etc., without understanding the seasonal variations. In summer, the demand is very high from people, from plants, from soils, from animals, and from nature, because heat waves are high. So I think we don't have data saying how much water is available in summer, which is really crucial. And so that's why I brought in this point. Perennials need groundwater. It's crucial for their yield, survival, etc. And millions of fruit trees have been dying, and you have seen that in the film. There is rising heat waves, and root zone moisture stress is causing low productivity and poor farmer incomes. And because many of our irrigation wells, at least among the smaller and marginal farmers, is shared. They have one source, it serves 5-6 farmers. So there's a real huge issue that's coming in when we address small and marginal farmers of their livelihoods. So irrigation must double per kg. That's the ambition with which we start. So what I'm trying to say is that groundwater usage is the enduring gauge of how we are intelligent in this planet. So I think that's something which is coming next. Now let's look at the state of the art, because the state of the art are two things: drip, and over that is precision irrigation. Drip arrived in India in 1980s and even now is considered the state of the art. Precision irrigation is rather a decade old. Both of them are heavily promoted by the government of India with subsidies, promotions, etc., etc. Campus trial shows that water saved in a drip is 70% compared to flood. Whereas farmer practice shows they give 65 to 75% higher water application compared to scientists' recommendation. So there is this huge reality that we must check out on, that net there is no water saving. It's just that we are having pipes running, which reduces the labor cost that flood irrigation involves. The next is the logic of drip. Drip logic is field capacity to wilting point. Whereas anybody will tell you that what you require is a certain level of moisture. But here it is field capacity to wilting point. Why? Because that is ideal and effective in the application of petrochemicals like urea. Look at Punjab. What happened in Punjab? In Punjab or Haryana, the Green Revolution areas, the fertilizer response was coming down. So people doubled their fertilizer or tripled their fertilizer application, and also the water. That water had to get drained out. So they polluted all the water bodies, all the tanks, etc. Right? And so therefore, the entire science of drip is driven for the application of petrochemicals like urea, etc., which is another side product of the petrochemical industry. In those days, the push was that you can have multiple byproducts and you should market it, etc. But at the same time, because of that application, it is extremely poor in accounting for soil biology and microbial survival, because microbes require a regime of moisture, right? Hariharan Sahab was talking about Europe. The reason is of the health of that soil is because of the microbes that have survived, because of the temperate climate that they have. Whereas now move one step further. In precision irrigation, which is another big, you are finding 30 to 100 micron plastic mulch covering the soil and the drip laterals. Now, imagine mulch, this plastic mulch has to be replaced every crop season. In tomatoes, they do it every 4 months. So you find huge piles of single plastic, right? Either some are burnt or many of them are staying. But the worst is that they shred into the soil, the pieces, because when you're pulling it out, because they're 30 micron, 40 micron, they cut and therefore they go into the soil. So what is net we observe? Precision irrigation leads to zero aeration because the soil is covered with mulch, plastic mulch, right? And zero rainwater infiltration, right? That leads to a hard pan. So soon the soils are dead and they just are merely servers as an anchor for plants rather than the functional role that they can do in the production of food and the quality of food that is being produced. If this be the state of architecture, of art or science, and we claim to be so modern about it, then how are we going to improve soil health? So while DRIP did the chemical gaming, the precision is doing the soil damage that we are observing. So precision, so therefore, hence my topic, what is this science? What is this approach? What should be the paradigm and purpose of irrigation must change. Next. Okay, this was co-designed by farmers and women brought in a lot of inputs and that's that. And so we began by formulating the criteria for ideal architecture. We had no way of how to get to that, but we said, let's decide. Let's have a dream, right? And for perennial crops in groundwater scarce areas and using drip and precision irrigation, because we wanted to give a counterfactual to the state of the art. What did the farmer identify? Surface application of water and drip, tropical country, very high evaporation loss, water at the plant roots. Reduce water application by half, soil requires 1/3 of water compared to scientific recommendation for drip. I'm not talking about farmers' practice, but scientific. This has all been validated. Optimum root zone measured moisture. Everybody knows how much water is required by a tree in its life cycle and the soil type. But nobody knows how much moisture is required. You can check it. That is not the thing at all. So therefore, rather than looking at water in its quantity form, we have to shift to moisture in its intensity being our measurement. So we adopt KC values, our computer program. We developed it so that we can determine the moisture, which is derived from the scientist recommendation of the quantum of water to be applied. Water, soil, and root synergy. That is the key. That is, it works as an ecosystem, not autonomous by itself. This will lead to wider moisture spread and ecosystem for nature, nutrient catchment and soil. This is what they suggested it should be there. So local preparation of an application of native biodiverse microbes and mycorrhizae, and to that you add other things. Here I want to take a minute off of you. I received the Prime Minister's award for whatever I did Swarm. And then there was this exhibition, etc. And I could see all the VIPs going. There were, out of about 500 stalls, there were at least 50 to 60 stalls, which were developing hybrid worms or microbes, which would multiply every half hour. And people were thrilled and people are applying it. This is the worst thing that can happen because ecosystem of the soils vary from region to region. If we have alien invasive species, right, that is going to be the death of the native microorganisms. That is my biggest worry, and that's why I made it a condition, even with the university where I'm working, that it has to be locally prepared, right? So I think we need to be guarded about our hurry to go in for things without understanding. We did that with trees. Native trees. Western Ghats has full of invasive species. If we can, in that case, maybe you can cut them or burn them. But if it gets into a soil, you have an irreversible damage. So that's why I stress on that. We developed that. I developed it talking to different farmers, went all over India. And India has very rich farm practices, right, in terms of soil health. Then information should be provided on the moisture availability because what does the farmer want? He cannot see water on the surface. He doesn't know how much has gone to the root zone. So he will over apply. So therefore you have to show him, right, You can't dig and show him. So we have developed a portable, we haven't developed, but we got somebody else to do it, which can show the intensity at varying depths and spread, right? This helps plan irrigation. So therefore, the farmer is now in sync because he gets the confidence of going by what is the recommended application. That is something which is very, very important for us. Then, most important, this is something that women were very keen on, and I'm very keen on, and my first film was that. Save trees in times of acute water scarcity in farms, especially in hot summers, and plant thirst. So this is the only technology I can say which has rations water, provide minimum root zone moisture only to keep the plants alive in summer. If they're alive in summer, they recoup in the monsoon. I think that's the most gratifying thing that I find has happened. Next. Am I too fast or should I be, is that clear?
Well, no, I think you should continue unless anyone wants to stop him. Maybe someone wants to put up. Gaurav, do you want to say something at this stage?
Yes, sir. I'm Gaurav from MIET.
Yes.
Sir, actually, we are belongs from civil engineering department, from civil engineering branch, and this is from agriculture. So it is difficult for us to understand. What is I want to know what is swar? What is the meaning of swar?
We will come to that, I'm sure. But to me, it doesn't matter. I'm not even an engineer, by the way, right?
Right.
What is important is, do you appreciate the kind of drift that he is offering? And I know you're speaking for many others who are present here as students. That's why I'm asking you.
Yes.
You do. Okay. Do you have any questions? Anything that you want to put up?
No, sir. No, sir.
Not right now. I think you should continue, Gopalji. And
Okay.
while I'll invite a few more people onto the panel here, and we will pause again, maybe 10, 15 minutes from now, and invite them to speak. Over to you.
Okay. SWAR is the system of water for agriculture rejuvenation. I mean, I couldn't put the full form because it's a PPT. System of water for agriculture rejuvenation. It's basically a moisture diffuser, right? That is embedded at the plant root zone, right? We did CAD and all that and understood how it should diffuse. That is connected to a drip lateral, and a micro tube takes the water down and serves it into the box, from where, which has granular size, specifically cut size of quartz. What is the problem? The problem of delivering moisture at the root zone or even subsurface is because of clogging. This avoids that clogging, right? And then to that, because the villagers said you have to synchronize water with soil. Therefore, we also had developed microbes and micro inoculums, etc. Right? And the embedded, we can have embedded sensor or just a plain sensor. We have a portable sensor. Now it's cheap because our target is small and marginal farms. So what does SWAR do? It delivers moisture to save water. Straight away 50% is saved. It is measured so that you minimize water, right? It is because, as I told you, we go by the Kc value. So what is the moisture intensity and spread? That itself does. Next is microbe inoculates for efficient plant use of soil moisture. Because one is to save, another is to minimize. The third is to not even minimize, optimize, I would say. The third is, how does that moisture get efficiently used? That's equally our importance. So therefore, soil moisture and is soil health is done through. Yeah. The next is, which is the transmitter of this whole system to the tree? It's the roots. So therefore, mycorrhizae is for effective root absorption with root spread to capture the moisture. More importantly, the nutrients that are required for the plant, right? Because we are trying to shift from the chemical application to strengthening the biological dimensions of the soil, right? And then there is management ease because, the farmer has the confidence that there is enough, right? Otherwise, talking vague words like threshold level, etc., without defining it, without being able to measure it, we will continue to have a huge gap between what is talked in theory or done in on-campus trials vis-a-vis farmer trials. There could be a 5%, 10% gap, but a 70% gap is absolutely abhorrible. This could address it. So what does SWAR offer? We offer the foundation to sustainable farming. Whether it is suitable to climate change, time will tell. Farmers and consumers, I want to stress consumers as well, they will build the mezzanine. They are looking for healthy food. They are looking for healthy practices. Farmers want a higher income. So between them, it is their choice. Next. So the stress I'm saying is, if we talk of water without talking about soil and soil health and the biology in the soil, we will not understand things better. So SWAR is the only subsurface irrigation, root zone irrigation technology, which delivers and spreads moisture at the rhizosphere, which is where the hub of the thing is, the active roots are. Timely availability of soil moisture at rhizosphere reduces evaporation and increases the biological activity, right? The evaporation is not just only from the surface, it's also from the leaves, right? Okay, and increases the biological activity. Our central point is the biological activity, and therefore increases crop yield and better translocation of water and nutrients. So that's what you try to do. Application of living compost. Living compost is something we develop, improves the microbial flora in the root zone, and it's a dynamic process. In chemicals, you have to keep putting it every time. Here it is. You are unleashing nature to multiply itself. Now, there are positive and not so positive microbes. It doesn't worry us. It's something which will get adjusted. We are studying that also. And I've compared my living compost with every other type of compost in the marketplace. Farmyard manure to vermicompost to anything. And it stands out. And it is validated by MSS Swaminathan Foundation and by the University of Iowa, which I'll share. To this organisms, we are also adding, because there are certain deficiencies or root diseases or plant diseases that come. So mycorrhizae, fungi, etc. further improve and deliver on the ambition of the farmer. They are not in the business of soil health alone. They're also interested in the yield and the quality of the yield. Especially in horticulture crops, if you, for example, when I worked it, I found that pomegranate was selling at 50 rupees because they were black, they were not look, stains, etc., etc. But if you improve it, you can sell it at 150 rupees a kilo. So I think the value is something which is very important. Many of us talk about the Israel as a great thing, but do we all know that in Israel, not now 30 years ago, the entire water is supplied through a grid. Farmers have to compete on yield and value in order to qualify to receive water. That unleashed a hell of a lot of people's ideas, etc., etc. So I think we should. I think that's what I would suggest that we should think. So living compost is an advisory. It is locally made, and as I stressed, microbes have to be local. The other things which improve the plant yield, etc., can come from outside. So the physical is given, chemical is given, because that's how it is: red soil, black soil. Chemical is the manipulation that we have done because of either to science that we had, but the real is that the biological must now emerge, because that only will align with nature. And then therefore you're working towards an ecosystem approach, because the new challenges that we have are not the challenges of just producing food, but also taking care of planet. Next. This is the University of Iowa. I'm just quoting it because they are considered the mecca. And once the north or the west, says something, then the rest of the industry in India opens up to talk to us. We find these talking about living compost. The product is 100% organic and does not use any chemicals or petroleum products to enhance its effectiveness. The raw materials it go into making is farm-based, locally available materials of plants and of farm animals. So we have built this whole science using the traditional wisdom that we have could pick from the farmers in all over, from Punjab to Madhya Pradesh to Dabolkar, etc., etc. We got it and then got it validated with ICRISAT so that the right science, we are also talking in terms of science and not just sort of romanticizing our history. The availability of nutrients in the product-rich plants via a microbial process which converts fiber and other carbon compounds which are utilized by mycorrhiza and rhizobia. This enhances absorption of organically born plant nutrients in the product, right? So it is the inorganic versus the organic. That is also the material difference that we are making. We found this product very effective in farm trials. They've done it, and field testing, they've even taken a few pieces of soil and the methodology of doing living compost. They'll change it there. It's also now being done in Kenya by somebody else. Conducted in tropical conditions in India, and they will begin long-term experiments. They are coming this December, and for thinking of something that can lead to even improvement. Because what we have started is a process. I don't think we have the final product. The final product will come from the ingenuity of people and the ability of the scientists to measure that. Next. So what does SWAR demonstrate? Very clearly. All these trials were done by independent agencies, right? All over India, with keeping different parameters in mind, right? They show that SWAR compared to DRIP, and when I'm talking of DRIP, I'm talking of the scientific recommendation, right? And this shows the following: 50 to 60% less use compared to DRIP, straight away. And if it is with living compost, we see even better results. 10% higher yield and improved crop quality. With living compost, this even goes much, much higher, right? Not the yield, but the quality of the yield, which will fetch you a better price. 20% less nutrient application, because you have got soluble nutrients that can all be sent through, directly reaching at the root zone, reducing the quantum applied, as well as the efficacy of whatever you are applying. 30% less electricity, because using less of the power, and electricity is subsidized. Water is groundwater is private property. So we have to handle these social issues as well. One important thing is in Orissa, in Bihar, we could use lower HP pumps, because the whole drip logic is driven by one kind of pressured irrigation. We don't need that. We are slowing down the irrigation. 60 to 75% labor cost, because there's no water on the surface, right? In the monsoon, of course, weeds will come. We don't. So if weeds come, either the farmer has to incur a lot of weed removal cost, or will apply weedicides. One is costly, and the other is an environmental price that we pay. We also found, by very fortuitous circumstances, not at all our original intent, but this was done in Hariharan, that it works with saline water. Now I'm working with the university, with the KVK in Ramnad in Tamil Nadu, to further get at what salinity level can be managed. Because what are we doing? We are diffusing the salinity, right? Whereas what happens in a drip, it falls at one place, and because it falls at one place, that place becomes white and becomes salt. And that's what we find. And then, as I told you, my delight is to ration water and keep it, and we have found this working very well. So the yield has gone up, the productivity has gone up, and more importantly, trees bear fruit only after several years, right? And they're long gestation plants, and therefore it's very important that we address moisture stress in them, save water. So we got just in recent times, 2022, I mean, earlier we received awards, etc. We also have got some cash prizes, but just want to say that FICCI has given us the Water Technology Innovation Award, and IARI, Arise Pusa Krishi, has given us their award. The reason I'm more excited about Arise Pusa Krishi Award is that the IARI, which has been the big promoter of drip and precision, are now opened up the doors for a conversation. Next. It has been published by many articles. I'm just quoting the ones in the last year. Niti Aayog has published it at the International Conference on Climate Risk, etc. This was presented also. There's an article in the State of Environment 2023 published by the Center for Science and Environment, New Delhi. And then IRMA has published something. The German Development Cooperation in India has published this in their innovation booklet. Just to say that I'm talking all this based on data, right? And actual work and done by autonomous third parties. Next. So I want to tell you before, this is my last slide, because I think in my journey, the things to be used, you change the measure. See, nothing can happen by Gopal himself, right? By Hariharan alone. You have to get the entire society start rethinking. I think where we should intervene are in the following: change the measure. Once you change the measure from water quantum to moisture intensity, a totally different science takes on. Quest takes on. Change the approach from chemical analysis to the dynamics of soil biology. Let me tell you, all my soil biology are still being tested in the lab using the Fertilizer Control Act. That is the measure. So therefore, we have to change that. The approach has to change. Because if we want to push more planet-oriented science, human well-being oriented science, we have to change those as well. Change our thinking. Many of us think of information and more accumulate information. No, get to insights, even a few, but it takes time, but that's crucial to interpret the information that you receive. Not sympathy, but empathy, very much, because I find that when you work with the people, you don't say, I've come here to develop you, but you say, together, let's change the world. Another world is possible. Persona change, challenge ourselves. Let's not challenge others alone, which we should do, but challenging ourselves, re-questioning ourselves, remodifying ourselves, revalidating ourselves, re-examine. I think that's very crucial. So let me come with the last thing, which is about, the entire story about 30 years ago, Ramesh Chandra, who is now a member of the Niti Aayog, a very good scientist, he told me, Gopal, the future of Indian food is cacti based. That was it. Because climate change, all that was started discussion in 1980. So if we are celebrating the millets so much, why are we celebrating it? Simple, because we have to get rid of C4 crops and move to C3 crops. So I think the powers that be are not going to be driven by good ideas and good practices, etc. Right? So it is today, I believe, a good circumstance for me to say Swar is a technology, because there is a need for it that they are seeing. Otherwise, they're driven by their own stuff. I'll conclude with this story again, because all of you are engineers, architects, etc. I want to draw that analogy from my own life. About 4 decades ago, I was building housing for the rural poor because I thought that I had the free time, our team had a free time, and let's do that. So the government had a housing scheme, but couldn't deliver at all. They were falling in the targets, and they were very keen that I help them. So I offered to help them. But then the amount that was payable was 6,840 rupees. Those days, right? So that was very low. So I wanted it. I can't build a house with that money. And people will not contribute. They may give some labor. So I looked at it. I studied Hassan Fatih, the work in Trivandrum that was done, etc. And then I said, okay, what do we do? We came to a conclusion that instead of each house being independent, we'll put 4 walls together. And because of my background in English and all that, and knew the collectors, reluctantly they agreed. So we started building the houses. I did all the homework that is required. One day, a bunch of women walked up to me and they said, Mr. Gopal, and I said, Mr. Gopal, sir, our wage is 2 rupees 50 paise. Why don't you increase our wage? I told them, look, the cost of cement is this, the cost of steel is this, the cost of X, Y, and Z is this. I'm helpless. But then that night when I went back home, I said, no, what am I here for? For the well-being of these women, or so build houses? Then I went back. Then I took multiple iterations and they came with such fantastic stories. But to cut a long story short, what I concluded, and this is something which I want engineering and design students to think. The design decides the structure. The structure decides the materials. The materials decide the people who will labor for it. If we were to remove people and planet today, we have to go back to our drawing boards. We have to think of a design which is centered on people and planet, and rather than sort of, go away. So that's my whole story. And let me put the last 2 slides next. This is our pomegranate. This is the pomegranate farm. This is the jasmine I'm doing, because jasmine is a very important flower crop. These are fruit crop. Next, these are some household thing. This is what I did in Bangalore, a trial, basically on a medium, trying to see what can be done, aimed at attracting bees and butterflies. So bees could come, butterflies haven't, until they come early in the morning. But this is just to tell you, because the only space available, public space available in Bangalore are the mediums. All the other spaces are gone. So that's what I wanted. So therefore, SWAR is the foundation to smart irrigation for healthy soils and food. Farmers and customers build the mezzanine. And that's very much. Thank you very much. I'm ready for your questions. Right.
Wonderful. May I invite Abraham Yehuda first for 2 reasons. One, this is about water, and Abraham, you have been working on water for many years now. You are completely passionate about how you can enable technologies. The second reason is that he talked about Israel, and you have a wonderful long relationship with many tech solution providers from Israel. What is your take on what he has offered so far, Abraham Yehuda? You have to unmute, please. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My first take is bringing in sufficient water into agriculture. Easier said than done. Even Israel had its major challenges in this area, and they moved very quickly from a water scarce industry into a water excess industry. This they did firstly by recycling water. This is something that we pay lip service to in India, but do precious little on. For example, grey water that is taken out of various establishments, whether it's industry or residential, is not utilized. The quality of the water, first of all, has to be made specific for agriculture. And this can be done with, of course, the right kind of governance. We've spoken about this in earlier days. I don't see that happening too much on the ground. So unless you get in sufficient amount of water into the fields for agriculture, it's going to be very difficult. The second challenge I see in India is the growth of so-called foreign saplings or foreign plants that have been invading our spheres. For example, it's happening a lot in the Western Ghats. And this is probably the reason why there is so much excess water and flooding too. But the horse has bolted, one can say, but if corrective action can be taken, then we can somehow save and salvage the situation. Now, once again, as I said earlier, easier said than done. I'm just presenting the issues, and I also would like to say that Israel has managed to go even a step further. Now, they have the wherewithal financially for that, and that's desalination, which is something we cannot afford. It's a very, very expensive process and requires a lot of energy. So if we leave that aside, we are stuck with water recycling. And I think if we are able to address this collectively, then we can come a long way in solving the problems of our farmers.
Completely with you. Completely with you. You know, I'm really glad that you are here, Abraham, because I mean, and at short notice. The reason is this: you look at him telling us about the spectrum of approvals that he has got from all these wonderful institutions, and yet he's not able to move it. So what primarily many such people need in whatever sector, especially when you have innovation of this kind, is communication, what you call IEC, right? and then to see how markets or those people who need it are somewhere communicated, told about what this can be, and then the product or the idea, the process has to be scaled. Now, this is where people like him need help. And if I go back to the conversation we had, they must see how we become a platform for such people, because otherwise we cannot accelerate this, and we will, continue to talk about how the horse is bolted. Gopalji, you talked about the organization in Trivandrum, and that's Costford Foundation that is run by that wonderful Gandhian Laurie Baker. I had the opportunity, I would say, of working with him and the institution in 1989 or some such thing for about 6-7 months, and I documented some of the work that he was doing at that point of time, among many other things that I did foolishly. Dr. Rama Rajgopal, would you have a take? Would you have something to offer? Dr. Rama, I sort of promoted you here as a panelist in order that we hear you too. Now, first, who is Mamta Rawat? You are here and you're a member of WISE, the Women in Sustainability and Environment of the Prem Jain Trust. Mamta, what is your take on what you've heard?
It's wonderful to hear, Mr. Gopal to talk about Swara and the entire, journey which he has done, over the years, and share the wisdom with all of us here. And even equally to you, Mr. Hariharan, the way you, set up the stage and the sort of facts you have shared, the sort of, detailings you have done, it was amazing. So, I have been working for almost 13 years in the field of sustainability, net zero, climate change. But the sort of work Mr. Gopal has been doing is, on the ground. It is like, connecting to the, the basic level of, let's say the 80% of, the irrigation, which we all were talking about. And, at built environment, maybe as you stated, Mr. Hariharan, that we are just dealing with the 7% of the water. So it is indeed interesting, to see this entire technology or the science coming into the, market, and, whether it's infra or whether it's agriculture. I saw the image, putting up the irrigation system on the middle of the roads, So that was amazing, and it is great initiative to enlighten the bright minds and, put them with the seed of thinking beyond which we all are seeing right now. So thank you so much for organizing this and sharing this knowledge with all of us. It was indeed a great session. Thank you.
Thank you, Mamta. And as a relatively younger professional, I asked this in the genuine spirit of learning from people like you, Mamta. How do we take this predicament that people like Mr. Gopal have of having some wonderful things to offer to the soil, water, ecology, and yet are lost, unheard, unsung, unhonored, of course, that's okay. What do we do to help them?
I think, you are bang on it, increasing awareness through the platforms like PJMT and, reaching out to more budding professionals, students. So I think that is one of the great initiatives. Yeah. Also, I feel associations like Indian Plumbing, Association, which is relatively working around plumbing and the water part of it. And then there are many associations, Mr. Gopal himself might be knowing through agriculture and, government initiatives and all. I think we first have to increase more of awareness, education, build skills to tackle all this, implement and, take this way forward. So this is like, on the pyramid, top to bottom and bottom to top approach, which we all need to cater about. I think that's I think that comes on the top of the mind right now.
Absolutely. In fact, I must remind all participants here, some of them who have come from the past two, come in the past two on these on the lecture series, that at the trust, one of the things that, some of the core custodians here, Mamta is one of them now, is this. We are telling ourselves that we have to go beyond what we are doing as green footprint in our cities. buildings and built environment is way too small. India is a country of 600,000 villages, 250,000 panchayats. And I can keep reeling out numbers, but that's not important. What is important is that this 3% of our landmass of no more than 200,000 square kilometers, called our cities, today has about 40% of all its population, the entire country's population, of this 3%. And we do nothing about the other, I would say 97 minus 20%, let's say, of forests. So 77, 80% of our lands, we do nothing. And Gopalji put 84% for agricultural water. I keep telling myself that it's about 80%, because there is a balancing number between industrial wastewater and urban wastewater, as Mamta said. Anyone else who wants to speak from among the youngsters here, the students here, all you have to do is raise your hand and we will allow you to talk, or we'll give you the permission to talk. Anyone at all, please, especially some of the young engineers. And let me also respond, or maybe I'll invite Gopalji to respond to this one. You heard Gaurav Kashyap saying, well, we are civil engineers, we don't understand many of the things that you're talking about. I'd like to believe that, somewhere in our education, we seem to slaughter ourselves and say, I am a doctor, I'm a civil engineer, so I need not know about other things. This whole issue of multidisciplinary learning or applying for solutions doesn't seem to somehow, penetrate our education system. Gopalji, anything on that? Maybe Abraham will want to speak on that after.
Well, I think what we are trying to do is to get the principles of ecology mainstreamed into every science, including civil engineering.
I agree,
right?
but why? How do we?
Let me give you a practical example. Bangalore had heavy 100 mm rainfall, right? And in an hour or so, and we can calculate all that. And how come it led to such devastated flooding? We are saying, no, there's excess of rain, etc. Or we're saying, no, everything is paved, etc. No. The civil engineers would say, let's pump it out fast, get rid of it. I would say, as an ecologist, slow it down. In nature, it slows down. So between science and ecology, there is that difference, right?
Brilliant. Gaurav, you want to respond to that before we ask Mr. Abraham Yehuda to respond? The engineer wants to get rid of the problem. The engineer does not see it as a resource.
Yes. Now I understand, sir. It's a very useful technique which Mr. K.S. Gopal has used.
Yeah, let me add before I invite Mr. Abraham. An engineer, a mechanical engineer working on, say, plumbing systems, he is only looking at the pipe. He doesn't look at what exists at the start of the pipe. How do I harvest more water locally? How do I ensure that the soil is becoming a storage reservoir for me? Because, every fistful of soil, all right, can hold up to something like 10,000 liters of moisture, right? Plants don't need watering, plants need moisture. You heard him speak about the kind of irrigation systems that he employs. Many of the things that Gopalji spoke about, he sort of assumed some knowledge from our side as listeners. Actually, a lot of the things that he needs to break it down and have a more basic primer if he wants to, connect with people like you, Gaurav. Over to you, Abraham.
Just like to add here that the ground cover levels in our cities in particular has been depleted. And I can give you the example of Bombay, which was once, you could call it a green city, because all builders, construction, government, municipality would ensure there was a lot of ground cover in the city. By that, I mean every building had a compound and it was exposed to the sun. So there was whatever rain that fell, 50 to 60% of it went into the soil and was stored for the future. That's now virtually out of the way because of the exploitation of every available square meter of land in the city. So that's where we're losing out. Coming back to a solution, I'd say one good source would be to tap the potential that's emerging from our colleges of agriculture. There are many colleges of agriculture in the country. And what we have been able to do, when I say we, I mean Israel and the kibbutz movement, is to take a whole lot of young boys and girls from our small towns, villages, and cities, send them to the kibbutz in Israel for a period of 1 year, whereby they were trained in various aspects of agriculture. They stayed there, so they got that experience of living in another country. I must remind you that many of them had never even left their districts, and this was the first time they were abroad. And they came back really inspired and charged up, and many of them set up enterprises of their own. So this is one way. Third aspect that comes to mind is the very low level of irrigation in the country, despite all efforts. And I just would like to say, for example, that all three, right now maybe four, Israeli drip irrigation manufacturers have more than one plant in India, and they're producing and they're selling. But yet we see that the percentage cover for drip irrigation in the country is relatively low in percentage. So that is something that we need to address as well, because the combination of recycling, of using recycled water and increasing the level of drip irrigation in our farming will go some way in resolving the issues.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. Rama Rajgopal, do you want to speak? Do you want to say hello to us if you're here? Okay.
Incidentally, Rama is my wife.
Oh, really? I'm so sorry. I thought maybe she wants to speak and I didn't know. Because I saw the appellation, I decided, I realized that she's not a student and I wanted to see if she will want to speak. Never mind. Jain, are you there? I know you didn't want to speak, but if you do want to speak, it will be our privilege. Jain Oberoi, he's also the chair of the PJMT West. He was former chair for the Indian Green Building Council for Jaipur. Jain, okay. I think he had messaged me saying that he doesn't want to speak. That's it. Payal, first I must tell you, at the risk of embarrassing Abraham, Payal, are you there? Good afternoon to you.
Yeah. Yes, good afternoon. Yes, I'm here, Doctor.
Just to tell you that the more famous person is not Abraham, but his wife Roshni, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, Roshni Udyavar's husband is Abraham, another way of
saying it.
Okay. And I know him therefore for many years now.
And we have Roshni with us. I have been chatting with her on different occasions for the wise, so that's wonderful.
Of course.
Thank you for the introduction.
All of you in the community here who are in the sustainability sector, who know architecture, will know his wife. But Abraham's work has been quiet, but extremely discerning in the ways that he has tried to promote a lot of the things that he spoke about. When it comes to, especially when it comes to water efficiency, Israel and technologies, and people from here, from India, who can learn from that. Your take, Payal, on what Gopalji offered today, in the context of what we are nursing as vision and objectives at the Prem Jain Trust.
Very pertinent for us, Doctor, and I hope the students had a lot of takeaway from this. And I'd really like to know more about how they feel they can carry this message forward. I mean, this is thanks to you. This is part of our ongoing work of spreading the message of green. And just wanted to say thank you to Gopalji for being with us today and for such a wonderful session.
Right. And you're right about listening to some of the younger minds here, but no one's, raising hands here. Anyone, please, who wants to speak, we'll be very happy to hear. We have another maybe 6-7 minutes before we wind up the session. And as I said earlier, and I'm speaking on behalf of Gopalji here, your college, any of your students, even the faculty, if you want to work and co-create some things with Mr. K.S. Gopal, you're welcome to do so. You can connect with him, learn from him, contribute to what he's doing. Anyone here wants to speak, please? Now, well, that's one challenge I have. Gaurav, Kashyap, you are here. Maybe you want to, prod one of your students or colleagues to speak. Gaurav? Okay. Yes.
I'm
yes,
sure
yes.
we'll hear from them
Yes,
later.
Dr.
Oh, he's
Abraham,
here. Okay.
Abraham has something to offer. Go on, please. You have to unmute, please. You have to unmute. Yes.
I'm very impressed by what Gopalji had to say. The presentation was effective and pertinent for India. And I do wish that we can link up with you in
Fine.
terms of collaborations between
Absolutely.
Israeli and Indian companies. I'll get your contacts from
Sure.
Dr. Hariharan, and with your permission, I can communicate with you.
Gopal, do you want to respond to that? I'll connect the two
I
of
know
you.
it's perfectly fine. I think, I always have a lot of respect for the way Israel has solved that problem. I do think that it is a bit capital intensive in Israel. So we'll have to think of some other ways, etc. But we'll work that out. And I'm very happy that you are collaborating, that you are willing to talk to me, and I'm most keen to learn from you. But having said that, let me tell you, I am invited by the Israeli ambassador in India on the 3rd of August to meet him. I don't know for what reason, right? But certainly, Abraham, it will be a great pleasure to work together. I think we did, except that the goalpost is no longer irrigation and yield. The goalpost is well-being of planet. I think that's something which is important.
Right.
I just want to add here that we have managed to send more than 4,500 young boys and girls to Israel on their one-year stints over about 8 years. But then the most unfortunate thing happened that quite a few of them decided to stay back, and that contravened the understanding. They tried to enter the job market illegally over there. So the program has been temporarily stopped. We're trying to have it reinstated. But that apart, this is something that we should also be aware of, that sometimes we tend to score self goals by trying to be over smart. So an extremely good program was stymied, but there are other ways in which one can get the exposure.
How sad to hear this. And here is, anyway, very, very sad to hear that, 4,500 students, massive, that is wonderful, I maybe you should, I'm sure you have documented the impact that those who returned and, initiated things in India have brought about. I'm sure you have some such stories to share with us.
We do.
Lovely. Maybe we'll invite you to have that series of case studies or stories to be shared with our participants here one of these months. Right?
I'll be honored.
Lovely. One last question for you, Gopalji. You heard Mr. Abraham Yehuda talk about governance being central to our challenges. You also mentioned it. Interestingly, you talked about Israel's promotion of, accessibility to water being linked to how the individual farmer talks about yield and, of course, value of the produce that they will want to bring to the market. Would you want to add more on that one?
No, I think the point I'm saying is that in India, the entire science is dominated by agriculture scientists, right? Whereas I think because of the policy or the governance reform that Israel brought, it unleashed a totally new talent set that is absent in India. That's missing in India. Abraham, my also suggestion to you is, while that program has been temporarily withdrawn, I'm sure it will come back. I think the change agents no longer lie in the universities. There are lots of young people who are now going into the villages and living. They are the people who we should target. Lots of them, extremely committed, extremely bright, etc. So I think we need to, and kibbutz has been my childhood favorite.
Really? Of course.
That communal living, etc., etc. But I just want to add, Ibrahim, 2 things to you. One is that, yes, recycling is good. It is a supplementation to augmentation, etc. I was a part of the National Employment Guarantee Program. And watersheds was his #1 project. And lots of improvements are being shown on paper and possibly in reality of groundwater improvement. But do you know the demand always exceeded the supply? Everybody was pumping more water, more it is available. So I think that's what led us to saying, no, this is a game which will end sooner or later. Then you have to go to salt water, sea water. I mean, what kind of a stupidity is that? Now come to a related point. The related point is in Bangalore. Bangalore has medians, right? The medians, I told the BDA saying, let there not be any tar on the medians, right? Because the tar is obstructing the rainwater from going down. Now that is not just the rainwater going down, that also reduces my species option. Do you know it's just 8 inches and all it's required is not to put the tar there? I think there are simple things by which other things can happen. Otherwise, we are stuck. Let me tell you, Bangalore, I counted, has 1,100 hectares of such land on the median. Imagine what could be done with it. And if we do that, and if I attract bees and see how they behave, 5 years down the line, you would have electric cars. So the soot problem won't exist. We have to be ahead of times, not after times, and then here's a problem, etc. So I think we should, and it's very important that we don't look at just the technology part, which I'm very keen to learn from Ibrahim and build it into it, but we also get into the next practices that are towards the kind of ecological well-being that we see.
Oh. Change agents don't lie in universities anymore in India, Abraham.
Unmuted, Abraham.
Yes, okay. So let's, all I can say is that we can get more proactive.
Yeah, you know,
This
if you
area.
go back
See
to
the-
1947, about the
Yes.
same time that Israel got independence, David Ben-Gurion, for instance, he was the first, I don't know where the idea came from, to promote kibbutzes. The first 3 kibbutzes around Tel Aviv were created then. So the model of governance became integral to Israel over the last, say, 70 years, while we depended on, like Gopalji said, on our science and scientists, and somewhere we lost it. In 1967, we had a wonderful opportunity when India was hit by that massive deficit of food, and Indira
Yes.
Gandhi acted with the Green Revolution and such. He mentioned M.S. Swaminathan. He was the father of such things at that point of time. But then we didn't know. I continue to call it the age of ecological innocence, when we did not realize the impact we were making, you know, on poisoning our soils with fertilizers and pesticides. Although Rachel Carson had already written by 1964 or so her book, Spring something or the other.
Silent Spring.
Silent Spring, right. And clearly we knew the writing was on the wall for India, and yet we chose to go with the massive fertilizer, petroleum-based kinds of things that we did. Well, we all have our legacies. Every country, every nation has, and people have, families have. And I guess we'll have to see what we can do to put that horse back, you know, if it's bolted.
If
Yeah.
it's bolted.
Yeah. It's 4:18. We've spent a good length of time. Payal, if you want to have some closing notes, a couple of sentences, we can then wind this and, you know, and close the show. Payal, Jain? Okay. Anyone else who wants to say something at this point of time before I close?
Sorry, doctor. Sorry, I went on mute. No, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody. No,
Right,
nothing.
that's it, I
Nothing.
think. All
Thank
right.
you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Gopalji, once again. And this is just the beginning of, and it's just part of the journey since we have been doing these interactions, Gopalji, you and I, with a lot of others. And I must thank Vijay Kanda, who is the Bow Mission Director for Hyderabad, part of the Alltech Foundation, who discovered, shall we say, for at least for me, Mr. S Gopal. And we must act. And I, you know, like Abraham said, we must see how work of the kind that you do is not simply remaining within the realm of discussion. It has to move from there to the ground. You know, we must have maybe a Gram Panchayat taken up here, Abraham. I have some ideas like that to share with you. There is one Gram Panchayat of about 4,300 acres that somebody has invited us to work on. I was telling Gopalji about that. We'd like to see how some of these things can be integrated into the solutions that farmers need in that one place. And if we incubate it right, and if there is what people want as proof of performance, then we can move it to a few more. And there'll be others who will take it forward from us. We are all perishable in any case. So
there is one observation I'd like to make here. The Gram Panchayat idea is a very good one. We can move it, but one observation I've made about, especially in rural areas, is that the level of cooperation between two heads is much lower than it is in Israel. In Israel, people cooperate with each other. Be to dairy farms in which 4, 5, 6 kibbutzim, that is the plural of the kibbutz, offer different aspects of the needs of a dairy farm.
correct.
Not a single dairy kibbutz doesn't provide every solution for a dairy farm, as an example. And over here, I find, and we try to do this in Goa and some parts of Maharashtra. We found that people didn't want to cooperate with each other. They didn't want other farmers to step into their land. They feared something, somebody will take it over. What happens to the next generation, etc., etc.
Correct.
I personally don't know how to handle this, frankly.
Right.
I just don't have the experience in this.
I'm glad
and
you
I've not
said-
been here for a long time.
Correct.
But it's a matter to address.
Right. I'm glad you brought this up. In our communities, wherever you go across Gram Panchayats, social engineering is the first one, which is the challenge, not technical, not the solutions part. The second big challenge is the political engineering that we need to do, because our Gram Panchayats have been vitiated with all these political parties which have taken, whatever reins and control. Third, of course, is technical engineering. Having said that, I have at least 3 or 4 such communities, clusters of 13 to 14 villages. Therefore, take to every village something like, say, 700, 800 acres of land. You know what that extent is, and they're contiguous, right? They're all together. Therefore, enabling any such watershed and development of a watershed. I shall talk to you about that too. We'll draw in, good veterans like Gopalji into it. There are many, many players like this, wonderful young players. What is inspiring to me, I must tell all of you, as my last note to many of you youngsters, is people in the team who are working with us today are drawn from IIT Madras, from IIT Kharagpur. We have from at least half a dozen NITs across the country. We have one from the, what is it called? The one in Roorkee, which is also an IIT today. It's not like engineers are not interested in doing these things. You all need directions. If you are young and if you are inclined to work in these areas, trust me on this, many of us here are willing to guide you, enable, facilitate, and mentor you. So I leave this thought with Gaurav Kashyap, who is representing MIT today, that if you are students, if anyone from even your alumni are interested in connecting into these wonderful opportunities before India and before them, talk to us. Talk to Yatin Malik, and he will know how to connect all of us. Have a great weekend. Thank you so much for being here, all of you. And thank you, Gopalji, once again for your time. Abraham, for your insights, as always. And we shall take this forward with another session coming up on the last Friday of the next month. And we shall, of course, be intimating you all on who the speaker will be and what the theme will be for the next time. Thank you so much once again. Thank you, Payal. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gopalji.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I shall take leave then. Yeah, wonderful. Thanks a lot. Bye.